Hey, you guys, how's it going? My name's Matt Lewis. This is Pastor Steve Whinery coming to you live from Calvary Chapel, Tri-Cities. This is a question and answer program. If you guys have questions for Pastor Steve during the week, email me, crosswalkradio@gmail.com. You guys can text 707-872-7677. Of course, if you're watching live on social media, just post in the comments. We'll do our best to get to those. And we also welcome all you guys that are listening on the radio. We still love you, old school radio listeners. You have my heart. That's what I was at when I first got saved. Hope you guys had a very Merry Christmas. We had an awesome service at the Hapo Center and a really awesome candlelight service in our amphitheater. It was like perfect warm weather. It's one of the warmest services we had.
Yeah.
And no wind for the fires, and it's one of my favorite services.
Yep.
I do have some announcements for you guys that are local. One of those is the prophecy update that Steve does annually at the first of the year. This year it's going to be on Wednesday, January 17th. It's at 6:30 in our indoor sanctuary. And there won't be any worship. Steve just goes into it because it's obviously a lot of subject matter. Sometimes he does a two-parter depending on content and how far he gets. I'll tell you, it fills up. So if you want a special seat or whatever, you might want to get there a little bit early. But that'll be January 17th. And then I'll just have you talk about what you're doing tonight for Q&A and wrapping up the Israel thing.
Well, we've been doing a study about Israel in the last days, and so tonight is just kind of a wrap-up on that. And so I'm going to be doing a Q&A where anybody can ask questions, obviously, about what we've been talking about and specifics that they might be seeing in the Bible. I'll probably throw in a few passages before we get started, just to kind of wrap it up. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So then we'll be passing around mics, and they can just go to town with questions.
Yep.
All right. Let's jump into my first question for today, and it is regarding marriage. I'm praying about getting married. We are both believers and serving the Lord, but how do I know for sure that this person is the one God has for me?
Yeah. Well, you've already answered the main question. You need to have, you need to be married to somebody who knows the Lord. There's a passage at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 7 that talks about the fact that you can marry who you wish, but only in the Lord. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 39. And so that's the major thing. Does the guy know Jesus? Whenever I'm talking to somebody about getting married, you need to have a realistic assumption about what marriage is like. The best thing I can do as far as being able to bring what marriage is like across to somebody, what the relationship is like, is if you have brothers and sisters. If you have a brother, marriage is like living with your brother. That's what it's like. You're going to be married to a man who is a man, and he's going to be doing man things, and you're going to be familiar with each other, and so that's the closest it can get. And obviously outside of the physical realm. But when I think about my relationship with my sisters before I got married, it was close, and it was personal, and it was unguarded, and so that's what's happening when you get married, and so you need to recognize that. And so when you are dating or when you are engaged, you need to watch for things, because what's happening when you're dating, and actually when I've talked to people who have lived together, obviously talking about non-believers, but talk to people who've lived together and think that they've experienced marriage, they haven't. Because what you're getting in a dating situation or an engagement situation or even a living together situation is you're getting the best that person can give you, okay? And so if I was going back and looking at my own relationship with my wife before I got married, those are the things I'd be looking at. I realize she's giving me her best right now, and what's going to happen. And it's not like she was trying to deceive me or anything. It's just that's how people are. You're gonna get up in the morning. If you got a girlfriend, from a guy's perspective, you're gonna get up in the morning. If you're halfway decent, you're brushing your teeth, you're taking a shower, you're doing that kind of stuff. Where after you get married, you might not care about that, and so just realize that. And so pay attention to that. And so this actually is more important for people who are in abusive relationships. When I'm talking to somebody that is dating someone and this guy is laying hands on her or screaming and yelling at her and that kind of behavior, he's giving her his best at that point. And you can be absolutely assured that it's going to get worse after they get married. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. And so you have to pay attention to those things. This is something that God did with my wife. And so I'm dating her, and I don't know what it could have been, but I would do something, and God would speak to my wife and say, "So do you like that?" And I think I was a delight, but apparently not. And so God.
Now she didn't have any brothers, right?
Oh, she had no brothers.
So this adds to the man card thing.
Exactly. And so God, I would do something, and God would speak to her heart and say, "So, do you like that?" And she'd go, "Nope, I do not like that." And then he'd say, "So, you still want to marry him?" And she'd go, "Yes, I still do." And she said that happened a number of different times. And she didn't even tell me what it was about. Me, on the other hand, I'm just looking at her, and she's nice to me and kind to me and, just sweet. Never had an argument the whole time that we were dating, that kind of thing. And then when I got married, it was like, what happened? You're an imposter. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about when I'm letting you know that you're dealing with somebody who's doing their best at this point. And so just keep that in mind. And again, it's something where you have to look at that, and you got to look at it realistically and go, okay, so I'm dealing with somebody who's a sinner. And, it's like that's being exhibited here. And so do I want to live with this? The other thing in your position that when I'm talking to ladies, the Bible says clearly that a wife is supposed to submit to her husband. And so as unto the Lord. And there's a mutual submission. The Bible teaches that too. But when it comes down to brass tacks, the Bible puts responsibility for the relationship clearly on the husband. And so he's the one who is accountable before God. And so he's the one who is in charge. And that's the picture that you have in the book of Ephesians in chapter 5. Okay, so he's like Christ, and you're going to be like the church. And so one of the things that I tell ladies is that when they're dating, they don't have to submit. After they get married, they do have to submit. And so that's one of the things that you need to be looking at and looking at it realistically. Do you want to submit to this guy? Do you want this guy to be the one that God puts in charge of you for the rest of your life? And I'm trying to be scary on purpose so that you pay attention to this and make sure that you have your eyes wide open when you go into marriage. Benjamin Franklin said that people who are in the process of getting married, when you're looking for a wife, you need to have your eyes wide open. And he did it from a male perspective. And after you get married, you need to have your eyes half shut. And that's really good advice. It's really good advice. And so just be paying attention. And ultimately, obviously, what I'm talking about is you need to be going before the Lord and asking the Lord if this is the guy for you. Ultimately, it's a matter of prayer, just like with my wife. It's like, do you like what you see? No. Do you still want to be married to him? Yes. And it's that kind of thing. What God was doing was preparing her for a guy. And so that's what he's going to be doing with you. And that's what he's going to be doing with your prospective husband too, preparing you for a woman. And, but in the end, it's just an awesome thing. I like being married. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't married. I've always had fun being married, and I'm not just talking about in the physical arena. I've always had fun being married. I like it. I like having someone in my house. I like someone who cares about me, and it's really awesome. And so, a man who finds a wife finds a good thing, is what Proverbs says.
Amen.
So, yeah.
All right. Switching topics completely. Okay, helpful, and this is the question. Helpful medical and scientific advances aside, IA makes me anxious. Are there any indications in end times prophecy that could be about AI in the tribulation?
Okay, we're talking about AI,
Yep.
artificial intelligence, right?
Yep.
Okay. You don't have specifics, but when you're looking at Revelation chapter 13, this is a section that talks about the Antichrist's rule over the world, basically, and there's a passage in chapter 13 where it talks about the beast out of the earth, and it says in the passage, verse 14, he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he has granted, with which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it's the number of a man. His number is 666. And so you have a number that each person has, a mark specifically that each person is given, and it has nothing to do with cash. This is a cashless society. You can't buy or sell without this mark. And so when you're looking at the last days, one of the things that the Bible predicts is that there's going to be a digital currency, basically. And we can see that the whole world is moving towards that. It also talks about the fact that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark of, or the name of the beast or the number of his name. How are you going to do that? How's that going to happen? And that, again, you're talking about a system that isn't just confined to one kingdom. You're talking about a system that is worldwide at this point. And so that, again, has to be digital, and there has to be some way of identifying people. There has to be some way of knowing how transactions are going, whether or not transactions are taking place, that kind of situation. And so AI is totally that it's a setup for being able to do that kind of thing. Normally what you would have to do is you would have to have people who would be monitoring digital transactions to be able to put this in place in the sense that they'd have to be on top of this kind of thing. Right now we've got all kinds of digital transactions that we can make that has no reason for specific IDs in the sense of something on your right hand or your forehead. And so there's this whole combination of situations here, plus the fact that this is a controlling, it has a controlling aspect to this. What the beast wants to do is control the people on the planet. Again, how do you do this? When you're talking about the internet, we've got Bitcoin, we've got a number of ways that people can bypass government currencies. And the only way that you would be able to chase this down digitally again is if you have a group of people who are taking care of that. Well, if you have AI, you don't need that. And if you have AI combined with quantum computing, there's this whole revolution in computers that's about to come on the scene, and it has to do with quantum computing. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of that because it's it's way kind of complex. But basically, what you're looking at is, again, a digital revolution. It's going to take the speed of computers and multiply them radically, like better than 1,000 times as quick. As far as calculations go. Well, you take AI and you combine it with that, and you're going to have computer programs that could literally track every transaction that you have going on the planet. And so there's an indication that could be what's being spoken about here. Not only that, but there's deception that's taken place in this passage also. And when you're talking about AI, and quantum computing, specifically with AI, one of the things that's going on right now is corporations and schools are trying to figure out ways that they can tell if somebody is using AI to do papers, for example, or to do their work, for example, because you can get on Chat GPT and say, I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I did it once.
Right.
I said, give me a sermon on thus and such subject. And it came up with a sermon. Mm-hmm. And it was a 3-point sermon. And it wasn't very good, but they came up with a sermon. And actually, most sermons in America are not very good.
Yeah.
And so.
Didn't you do too, by Chuck Smith or something, and it did a flavor style of Chuck?
Yes, exactly. Did that too. And so you've already got that going on digitally as far as writing goes. The other thing that can be taking place is they can go in and, a picture is worth 1,000 words and a video is worth even more. Well, they can use AI to mimic people. Actually, that is taking place right now. There are scams that are going on right now where people are taking and recording your voice and using it to try to get money over the phone. And they're using AI to do this. And so they could record my voice actually mine is prime for this kind of nonsense because there's so much of my voice out there on the internet.
Sure.
So they can take my voice and they can make a phone call to somebody and make me say literally anything to that person. And what's usually happening in this kind of scam is basically the phone call will come in. I'm on the side of the road and my debit card's not working. Can you please call this number and give them so much money and blah 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 blah.
Yeah. Go get a gift card from Target.
Yeah, go get a gift card from Target. Yeah.
There was one. I don't know if you saw it. It was a car that crashed into one of our border security checkpoints up in north by Canada, northeast Canada. Mm-hmm. And the car flew flaming fire into the building, whatever. And the video came out, and they were trying to decipher if it was an AI video or an actual event.
Oh wow!
And because that technology's out there, they're looking at it going, "Is this fake or real?"
Right.
And that's the point where we're at in technology.
Right. Exactly. And so you got a situation right now where you guys have probably heard of gaslighting, and what that means is. It's the idea that I say things to you that are obvious lies, and I try to make you think that those things are true and that you're crazy for not believing them. And this is what politicians are doing with us right now. They'll say that for example, the whole situation with the border is not open. It's an obvious lie. Mm-hmm. And you have people who believe it because they've been gaslighted. Well, imagine if you've got an AI that's in control of all media. And, I've never been to, I have been to the southern border, but I haven't been to the southern border to see any of this stuff. I'm relying on news reports and video and that kind of thing. I'm relying on eyewitness testimony about the fact that certain things are happening on the border. And what if the eyewitness testimony is not an actual eyewitness? What if it's an AI construct, CGI? And so obviously the Antichrist is going to be somebody who's trying to deceive the whole earth, and AI can work in that whole thing. I think there's a limit to AI. One of the things that people are worried about is that AI is going to, that a computer intelligence is going to take over the world and destroy all of humanity. Well, the Bible's clear on the fact that that doesn't happen. And so, but that also puts the events that we're talking about when we're talking about end times in the near future. Because when experts are talking about AI at this point, they're talking about, right now, they're not even talking about consciousness, and it doesn't even matter whether AI has consciousness. What they're talking about is intelligence. And when you're looking at AI, is basically it's a computer program that's been programmed by somebody, and it's programmed with certain parameters, certain algorithms, but it's programmed obviously by a programmer, and so that programmer is putting within the program his values, his views, his vision. And now the AI goes on onto the internet and starts doing things. And it's going to be all based on that. And as time goes on, what happens is these programs get more intelligent, not conscious necessarily, but they get more intelligent, and they can outwit anybody who's trying to stop them in certain areas. And when you talk about this connected with quantum computing, you can get some real dangerous scenarios. And so you've got a guy who is greeny, and he decides that anybody who eats meat is polluting the world, and so they need to be stopped. Well, you put that into an AI, and the AI takes off with it, and it doesn't have any other kind of moral compass. How do you stop a person like that? And you can imagine all kinds of scenarios that can come up where that gets taken care of, whether it's false arrest or whether it's being killed by somebody because they get bad information, or that kind of stuff. It's it's a bunch of scenarios that you can have that you see in different arenas in the movies. So back in the 80s, they had a movie called War Games, where an AI was able to take over the nuclear arsenal of the United States. And that's something that people are actually worried about, that kind of stuff. And then it goes on from there. But there are limits to this whole thing, in the sense that the Bible doesn't teach that the world is destroyed through AI.
Right.
But the Bible does teach that there's a highly manipulative man who comes on the scene, and he is able to manipulate people into believing him and following after him and treating him like he's a god. One of the things that you would have with AI, and again with quantum computing, is you would have a situation that anybody who has access to that and controls something like that is going to be omnipotent almost.
Right.
Know everything. Again, when we're talking about AI, we're talking about something that can scan the internet, find every piece of information that's on it. And again, with quantum computing, in the sense that everything can happen quicker, it can know things instantaneously about people and about situations and about anything that it finds on the internet, basically. And when you talk about the internet is not going to just include those things that you have on the World Wide Web, in the sense of digital information that's been written into it. It's going to include things that are going on in your house, because what's happening now is people's houses are being connected to the internet. And so when you think of Alexa, or even doorbells, and some of the camera,
they can do it through your thermostat. They can do it.
Exactly.
The one guy found that his vacuum went to a server in China, and they could backwards hack into his Wi-Fi through his vacuum.
Wow. So there you go. And that's the Chinese doing that.
Yeah.
Just think of a radically intelligent AI, and what we're talking about here. Again, you got to divorce intelligence from consciousness, but an AI is going to be way radically more intelligent than anybody on the planet. And again, have an IQ that's off the charts. And so they have an AI that taught itself chess in a matter of like 8 hours in the sense of it. Well, it was taught chess, but it became better than any grandmaster on the planet within 8 hours.
Right.
And so
what about, I've heard you talk about this before, not to open up a can of worms, but when the Antichrist gets taken out or looks like he dies, that he comes back with this weird resurrection thing that could at that point be morphed into an AI version type of thing.
well, when you're talking about the image of the beast, we don't know what the image of the beast is.
But it's the propaganda guy.
Yeah. Yeah, the propaganda guy is the one who's doing this stuff.
Right. And so if you took World War II, which they had a ministry of propaganda, which was able to push their agenda,
Right.
with the technology of AI mixed with the spiritual, and I have a verse in Matthew 24, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. There's this weird spiritual thing going on there that is absolute deception.
Right.
And now you're mixing the spiritual satanic ability that his demons around the world can now have an excuse to how to unpack that in technology.
Right. Yep. And so, when I look at the image of the beast, I don't know exactly what's going on there. That could be a clone. Back when I was a kid, they thought it was a computer that was in Brussels that was running banking. It was a central banking type computer. They even called it the Beast.
Really?
Yeah. And so people thought that, and I always thought that was pretty out there. But it could be a clone. It could be something that has to do with holograms. It could be something along those lines. Just heard about a group of people that actually people over in Europe watch hologram concerts. And so one concert was ABBA, like the original, the young version of ABBA. They watched a whole holographic concert of ABBA.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, it's like that is one of those passages that I don't know exactly what's being spoken about there, but it could very well have something to do with some of the technologies that are on the verge of coming about here. We are in the end of times, because again, when we're talking about the technologies that we see coming on the scenes that are coming down the pike, the humanity is not going to be able to survive them.
Right.
And so some of these technologies are worse than nuclear weapons, because they're going to be things that people can control from their basements. So interesting.
Exciting times.
Interesting times.
2024.
Yep.
All right. Can you please explain the book of Joel? It seems like this is a prophetic book about end times, but also that it's happening in the present. When and where in history was the story happening?
Okay, the book of Joel is one of those books that is argued about as far as what the dating should be. And so there are some people who want to put it after the exile of the people of Israel to Babylon. And there are reasons for that, but there are also reasons to put it long before that point. It looks like the book of Amos quotes from Joel. And Amos is an 8th century BC book. We know the dating of Amos. And if it's quoting from Joel, then Joel would have to be put before Amos. And so 8th century is in the 700s AD, and that would put Joel in the 9th century, and that would be in the 800s BC. Doesn't have to be confined to that, but that's what it looks like. There's also some things that are going on in the book of Joel that are kind of interesting, because king's not mentioned, but priests are, as far as importance, and that could just be because the kings aren't mentioned. That's a possibility. But there was a period of time in Israeli history in the 9th century BC where Joash was a king after a woman named Athaliah had been killed. who had taken over the kingdom of Judah. And when Joash took over, he was a boy, and he was led by a priest. And so the priest was what would be called the regent, the guy who was actually running the government until the boy grew up. And then later on, the boy became king. And so the book of Joel would fit really well right in that period of time. And again, that's conjecture. That's my opinion on that whole thing. What's happening in the book of Joel is in chapter 1, it talks about a plague of locusts and also a drought that had plagued the nation of Judah. And what Joel does is he launches off from that, and he starts talking about the day of the Lord. Well, the day of the Lord is a period of time that starts with the tribulation period, goes all the way through the millennial period, and it ends at the end of the millennium with the destruction of the old earth and with the creation of the new heavens and the new earth. And so Joel is a last days book, and what's happening is it's launching off from this locust plague. What's really interesting about that is that there are, in the book of Revelation in chapter 9, there is a plague of not locusts but demons that are called locusts in the passage, and they have some similarities to some of the things that are stated in the book of Job. And so there's this 5-month period where it looks like demons are ravaging the planet Earth and causing people all kinds of consternation and harm and that kind of stuff. In the book of Joel, in
the book of Job or the book of Joel?
Book of Joel.
Joel, okay.
Yeah. In the book of Joel, there are also time markers. And so it talks about a great earthquake. It talks about the sun and the moon ceasing to give their light. It talks about the last judgment of people that are on the earth when Jesus returns, multitudes in the valley of decision. That's most likely talking about the sheep and goats judgment in Matthew chapter 25. And so you're right, it's prophetic, but it's launching off from a plague that it looks like took place in the 9th century BC, and we don't know specifically where that's at. So chapter 1 of the book of Joel is about events that those people went through, and when you get to chapter 2 and 3, what you're talking about is future events, and those being specifically connected with the book of Revelation.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, I did this question behind, because it kind of fits with what we were talking about, but it says this. Why does God use visions and dreams, ? Why not just tell us or show us through normal means? And so there is a passage out of Joel, Joel 2:28, and this is a famous quoted passage. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. Now, what's interesting about this, and I didn't really figure this out until this last year, but that's in the context of end times. Mm-hmm. A lot of people use that, if you have a vision or a dream, to point to this verse, but it's actually talking about it when in the verse after that it says, pour out my spirit in those days. But those days is specific to the end times tribulation period. But in any case, you have that. The question is, why does God do it that way?
You know what? I don't know. Because the Bible doesn't say.
Yeah.
This is one of the passages when I heard the question, it says this is a passage where God is speaking to Miriam specifically and Aaron, but he says, "Hear now my words." This is in Numbers chapter 12, verse 6. "If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision, and I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. I speak with him face to face, even plainly, and not in dark sayings, and he sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" And so when you're looking at Moses specifically, it talks about the fact that God spoke to him face to face. Now, by the way, right now he's speaking to Miriam face to face at this point. This is at the tabernacle, and God is speaking from the glory of God out of the tabernacle to her and to Aaron, and making it known to her that she's not all that she thinks she is, and neither is Aaron, and that Moses is somebody that you need to be paying attention to here. And so Moses was the exception to the rule. As far as why does God do it this way, I think I can just give you some conjecture here. Let's do it. Let's do it this way. You said instead of doing it in a normal way. So what's normal?
Yeah.
How are we going to do that? So each one of us is going to have an appearance of the glory of God in front of us, and then God's going to be speaking from his glory, or we're each going to have a burning bush, same thing, glory of God, or what's normal in that situation? God does speak. The Bible's clear on the fact that God speaks to your heart. He speaks in a still small voice. That's what happened when he was speaking to Elijah on Mount Sinai. He wasn't speaking through major events. There was an earthquake. There was a wind that shook the mountain. There was a fire that burnt the mountain. And it says that Elijah didn't hear he didn't see the Lord in those things. It wasn't until he heard a still small voice that he realized that God was speaking to him. And that's when he came out and had a conversation with the Lord. And so that continues to this day. God will speak to your heart about issues and things. But as far as the vision goes, and in this passage and in other passages, it equates a vision with a dream. And so it looks like a vision could be defined as a waking dream, where a dream is obviously a sleeping dream. And one of the things about a dream is that you're doing this when you are, laid flat on your back and you've got nothing else that is distracting you. And so that could be one of the reasons that God does this. Many times we're going through our day and we're focused on other things. And you know how hard it can be for the Lord to get through to you. And so that may be the reason that he does it. With a vision specifically, and actually even with a dream, what God is doing is taking over your brain. That's what's got to be taking place there. And so I'm seeing things that actually are not there. And so in a dream, in a normal dream, it's just my brain, basically going through the day or dealing with issues that are on my mind, or, just deep, just calming itself down, basically. My brain doing that kind of stuff. But when you're talking about a vision or a dream, what's happening is God is pointing to specific events. And in the case of a vision, he's making you see things that you wouldn't normally be able to see. And so he's taken over your vision in a vision. And I think that that's an effective way of communicating. It's much more effective than words. And it's not like God doesn't use words. And so when you get to the New Testament, Jesus comes along, and it's Jesus' words that we need to be paying attention to. There are visions that were given during the time of Jesus. When Jesus is coming down from the Mount of the Transfiguration, he lets the disciples know that they're not to tell the vision to anybody. And so they experienced a vision. And so that whole thing when they're on the mountain and the cloud comes and there's a voice that's coming from the cloud, God was taking over their brain at that point. And he was showing them things through that vision. And you have the same thing in other instances. In fact, Peter later on, he's in prison. He's delivered from prison by an angel. And he wakes up in the middle, he doesn't wake up, but he finds himself in the middle of the road, and he realizes that he's not having a vision. He thought he was having a vision at that point, and he realizes that it's real. That's an indication of how real visions are when somebody is given one. And so I think that's a very effective way to communicate with people, and that's probably why God uses visions and dreams in the lives of people that he specifically wants to communicate something to. It's probably the most effective way. So
I've only had one clear vision and dream, or whatever you want to call it, in my life, and it was right before my father died.
Mm-hmm.
And for like 6 months, I regularly, nightly had a vision of a fireman's memorial,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then I get a call. My dad disappeared, basically, found a boat, didn't find him. Fast forward to the memorial that I wasn't a part of because he was a fireman. They did a fireman's memorial, and I'm sitting there. And they, like if you've ever seen the movie Backdraft, or a movie where they have the white gloves and axes in a formal ceremony, I'm sitting in the chair, and here's my vision.
Yeah.
And clear as day. And one thing I think people don't understand is that it's not like a dream that's when you wake up, it's fuzzy and it's weird stuff going on. You're like, I remember some stuff, but I can't put it together. I can't articulate it.
Right,
No,
yeah.
these are clear things.
Yeah.
That I'm literally watching my dream in front of me that I had for the last 6 months. And then I never had another one after that.
Yeah.
And so, Paul, I just went through 2 Corinthians, and he says, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know.
Right.
So there's your out-of-body experience theology. But what he said is that it was so real I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
And, then you have John's Apocalypto, Book of Revelation, and those types of things. And so there's a spiritual thing to it that's different than your typical
Exactly.
dream,
Yeah.
and it can be communicated effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, here's my next one. Hello, Steve. My wife, kids, and I watch y'all's service from Corpus Christi. We've been looking for a church down here. We've been to a few, but ever since we watched you, we've learned a ton from you. We'd love to find a church that we can relate to, like y'all's church. I'm trying to be the southern accent here. Do you have any recommendations?
You know what? What I would do is, if I were you, is I'd go to calvarycca.org. Calvary, CALVARYCCA, Charlie Alpha, .org. And that is the web page for the Calvary Chapel Association. And on that web page, there's a church locator. And so you just get on there, and when the page comes up, there is an arrow pointing down to the church locator. You can push the button, and it will take you to a page where you can type in your either your address or your town or your zip code, and it will give you the Calvary chapels within 50 miles.
Oh, very cool.
And so that's what I would do if I were you. If you want a recommendation on other churches in your area, I would actually call that pastor, the pastor at that Calvary, and he's probably going to have a good idea of other good churches in your location. Obviously, Calvary Chapel isn't going to be the only good church around, and so, well, hopefully not. And so that's what I would do.
Yeah. So I am running into this increasingly, where you have a person, whether they move or they're in a new location or whatever, this question keeps coming up more.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times in certain areas, there are not a lot of good Bible teaching churches to recommend. If you're in one of those areas, well, first of all, here's a pro tip. Don't move to a place where there's no believers in a church.
Right, exactly.
Right? Like, here's your sign. If you're praying about moving out into the wilderness, you better have that pinned down.
Yeah.
But second to that is, if you, for whatever reason, are in that situation, would you recommend doing like a home church, a home Bible study, a small group, if there are absolutely no other options, or what would you tell them?
Well, I try. I try to get I try to get involved in some church. The Bible's clear on the fact that we're not to forsake the gathering of ourselves together, and so that's in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and 25. And so I would connect with some church, and home fellowship is a great thing to do. I understand the mechanics of that whole thing, in the sense that you may not be a teacher, or you may not have somebody that can teach that well, and so it's not going to actually necessarily meet the need that you're talking about. When I've been in situations where I felt like I wasn't getting fed at the church that I was involved in, I was listening to the radio. And so that's all I had back then.
Sure.
Was the radio, but I was listening to guys on the radio that I knew were good teachers. And so that was supplemental. to what I was getting at church in the first place. And we've got a glut of that. You're already listening to our program on the internet, and so there's ours plus a bunch of others that I could recommend, and so that will help you out. But I'd find some fellowship where I could go and get one-on-one with people, and doing a home study, doing a home fellowship is a great thing. My father-in-law, when he started his first home fellowship, it was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And one of the things that he did was he didn't know how to teach. He didn't know the Bible well enough. And so he just got tapes of Greg Laurie. And so they're, cassette tapes, and everybody would come over and they'd get a cassette recorder, a cassette player, pop the tape in and hit the play button and listen to a Bible study by Greg. Mm. And that's what they did in their fellowship. And then they prayed with each other and talked about the Bible study after the fact and things like that. So you can do something along those lines if you've got nothing better than that. But you need to be connected with some other people is the deal. You need to be accountable to other people. You need to have a place to minister to other people too. And God wants to use you. So
absolutely.
Connect with a church.
All right, there you go. Okay, it's December 27th. As of the recording of this program, we're going into the new year's 2024. Oh, by the way, I looked this up. 2024 will be our 12th year of True Set Free. 12th
Really?
year. Yeah. Excited about that. Our New Year, here's a question. Are New Year's resolutions biblical?
Are they biblical? There's nothing wrong with making a resolution in the sense of you're talking about hopefully looking for things that you want to do to change your life, but there's this whole issue with vows in the Bible, and so not that a resolution is a vow, but sometimes they become that with people, and they go before God and they say, God, this is the year that I'm going to, and then they make a resolution before God. And the Bible's clear on the fact that those things need to, if you vow something, that you need to do it. And so in the book of Ecclesiastes, in chapter 5 and verse 4 and 5, it says, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vowed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay. And in that case, what it's talking about is you've made a promise to give something to the Lord. And that, in essence, is what resolutions are about when you make them before God. Hoping for something better, making a resolution that I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to get myself in shape. There's nothing wrong with that. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord, this will stand. And so we've all got plans. You're allowed to make plans. You're allowed to, seek to better yourself and that kind of thing. Nothing unbiblical about that. But when it comes into the realm of making a promise to God, don't make promises that you're not going to keep, or don't make promises that you don't know if you can keep. It's better not to promise than to promise and not pay up, as Solomon said in that passage. And so that would be the only thing. A lot of people, obviously they make vows, and they even step out on those resolutions. So I'm going to lose weight, and so I go buy a gym membership. And so all the gyms in town are looking forward to January because there's all these people who are going to buy year-long memberships and show up for a short period of time and then never show up for the last 10 months, if they make it 2 months, and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left. This is probably my last one for today. What do I tell someone that wants to go to counseling, but they don't want to go to a church and talk to a pastor? They want to talk to a shrink or someone who has credentials. So basically, what's the difference between biblical counseling and psychiatry?
Okay, when I'm talking to some, it depends on who the person is. If they're a non-believer, then I would I would encourage them about that, talking to a pastor would be a good thing, as long as a pastor knows what he's talking about. And so this is something that's subject to the person who's giving counsel. You want to receive godly counsel, you want to receive wise counsel, and you especially want to receive biblical counsel. It needs to be something that the Bible actually says. I've been doing counseling for a very long time, for decades, and I can't tell you how many people who've come in from secular counseling and even from Christian counseling that have been told nonsense that the Bible flatly contradicts, and they've just messed up their lives because of it. And so first thing is, if I'm going to recommend a counselor, I want to make sure that the counselor knows actually what they're talking about and is going to give them wise counsel. I don't have anybody that I would recommend to a secular. I don't have a secular counselor that I would recommend anybody to. And the difference between Christian counseling and secular counseling, for the most part, there are a few, actually, very few schools of psychology that actually put responsibility on the person who's coming in for counseling. Otherwise, all they're doing is blame shifting. And this is what blame shifting is. It's not my fault. The reason I'm doing these things is because my mama made me do it, my daddy made me do it, the government made me do it, society made me do it, the circumstances made me do it. And all of those are about, it's not my fault, it's not me that is the problem, it's something else or somebody else. And that comes straight from the sin nature. When Adam and Eve sinned in taking from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God came to Adam and he gave him an opportunity to confess. He said, Adam, why are you hiding? Adam said, I was naked. God said, who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from? That's a yes or no question. It should have a yes or no answer. And what he should have said was, yes, I ate from the tree. Or, well, obviously he couldn't say no without lying. But what Adam did was he said, the woman, and what he does is points to Eve, not that you're Eve, but points to Eve and says, the woman that you gave me. And then he points to God. Gave me from the fruit and I did eat. And so what Adam is doing there is he's shifting blame from himself to the woman, and then he ultimately shifts it to God, saying that if you hadn't given me this woman, then I would have never been in the position to eat the fruit. So guess whose fault it is? God. And that's blame shifting. And what God does is he ignores the man. And he turns to the woman and he says, did you do this? And she does exactly the same thing. And she points to the serpent and says, the serpent deceived me and I did eat. And the serpent has nobody to point to because he's got no arms. And so,
dad joke.
Yeah, dad joke. But in any case, what you have is blame shifting in that situation, and that's what happens in schools of psychology. And so if I was talking to somebody who was looking at, this is what I would be saying to them, who was looking at going to a psychologist or to a psychiatrist, I would talk to them about whether or not they want their problem actually solved. Because what people do is they go down these rabbit holes. And so for, 20 years or so, the rabbit hole was, you don't really have a problem here that can be connected with you yourself. What you have is a chemical imbalance, and these magic pills will help you out and fix everything for you. And that's been thoroughly debunked at this point, and psychologists aren't using that anymore. Actually, some of them still are clinging to that whole thing. Some of them are saying, we never said that, which is nonsense. And others have moved on and decided that that's not going to be helpful in taking care of people's problems. They've kind of figured this stuff out. But again, that's another "it's not my fault" scenario. And what the Bible says is that it is your fault. And it's not that people haven't done things to you. I've had things done to me that I didn't like. That doesn't mean that I get to go out and do them to other people. In fact, it makes me more accountable not to go out and do those things to other people. If I've been abused and I know what it's like to be abused, why would I go and abuse somebody else? That's not something I can blame on my abuser. That's something that is mine, and I need to own it, and I need to turn away from that. And so the Bible talks about sin. And here's the cool thing about sin. Sin condemns me, it does, but sin can be repented of. Sin is not something that I have to keep for the rest of my life. Sin is not something that I can never get over. Sin is something that can be repented of, it can be forgiven, and it can be turned away from. And so what God does with us in our situations is, if I have disobeyed the commands of God, he lets me know that this is sin and it needs to be turned away from. And what got me there can matter in certain instances, but it is not the cause. The cause is my fallen nature and the fact that I've decided to do this thing. And again, that is something that can be turned away from. It's the ultimate hope. So if I'm told that I've got a disease that I can never get over and I have to take this magic pill for the rest of my life, that is not hopeful, and especially if you're taking the pills. And if I've been told that I've got a disease and I'm never going to get over it, and so I have to be on my guard for the rest of my life. And what I'm talking about is alcoholism, or the whole issue with addiction and that kind of thing. That's pretty depressing. And again, it takes the blame off of me, but it puts me in a place where I can never change in that instance. I'm always going to be this, is the point. And the Bible flatly says that that's not true. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians 6 that says some of you were homosexuals, some of you were sodomites, some of you were drunks, people who were addicted to alcohol, some of you were thieves, some of you, it goes through a whole list of things, and it says were, some of you were, but now you've been cleansed and you've been filled with the Spirit, and your life is, basically your life has been changed. At this point, that's the hope of the gospel. So if I was talking to somebody, I go, okay, do you want to go down to go down the rabbit hole with these people and sit there and try to mess around with whatever your issue is for the next 2 or 3 years, or would you like to get the answer, quickly and neatly and have a changed life? And if the answer to that is the second, then I would be recommending them to what the Bible has to say and to a biblical counselor at that point. The other thing about this is when I'm looking at somebody who wants to go in that direction, I would be gentle with the information, in the sense that I wouldn't burn bridges with them. I wouldn't be yelling and screaming at them or trying to force them to go to a biblical counselor, because with human psychology, and I mean it in the classical term, with human psychology, what that does is drives people away, and drives people away from your agenda to get them to pick the right choice, drives them away. And they actually, in many cases, won't consider it, or they won't consider it until they're absolutely desperate. Where, on the other hand, if you tell them, okay, well, if you want to go and talk to that person, you give them the option. Here's what I would recommend in this situation. And they go, no, I want to go to somebody who's credentialed. At that point, I would talk to them a little bit more and say, you need to be informed on these things, but in my case, I would say, well, this is, some of the stuff that they're going to tell you, and that can be something that takes you on a rabbit trail for years, and it would be much better if you just got told the truth in this situation. And if they went, no, you know what, I really want to go do this. At that point I go, okay. And, if you get in a situation where you realize that this isn't working, then this is an option for you. And you need to take the option at that point. So I'd leave the door open, leave the bridges unburned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I tell people is that when you're looking at the case that you laid out is this: they don't believe in spiritual things. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to fix you in the area of your mind when the God who made you designed you to have a new flesh through the power of his Spirit.
Right.
So
exactly.
Where the power comes from is not of yourself, but from the new man that he makes by filling you with his Spirit to do the things.
Right.
And when you look at, because I came from corrections and you had shrinks in there all the time, and you look at the statistics and the success rate, mm-hmm. and now it's like you watch TV, there's advertisements for this stuff on YouTube, and hey, come talk to this person, see a shrink, and there's all these advertisements for it. I think it's because our culture, a lot of them, like people are looking for a friend and someone to talk to in this weird social media time that we're in. But if you have to go to talk to somebody for 2 years and you haven't fixed or done anything different about your problem, here's your sign. It may not be working. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And so some of it is like, dude, this doesn't take 10 years.
Yeah. So. The other thing about it is, in some instances, it can actually be detrimental. And so, for example, another school of psychology has the attitude that you've got somebody who's coming in and they're feeling guilty about the things that they're doing. The problem is not the things that they're doing or the fact that their conscience is, well, the problem is their conscience. The problem is not the things that they're doing. The problem is that their moral stance is incorrect. And so what they'll do is get them to lower the standards. Well, the standards, most times, are standards that God has placed in your heart. And it's an evidence of the work of the Holy Spirit in a person's life. And you harden yourself against those things, and you can get yourself into all kinds of really awful issues. And I'm not saying that about everything. There are some standards that are ridiculous in the sense of you've got people who can be OCD about things that are not biblical, right? But on the other hand, if we're talking about, I feel guilty because I slept around, and the counselor is telling you need to not feel guilty, your standards are too high. Well, wrong. That the reason that you feel guilty is because that's sin. And you need to understand that it's sin, and you don't lower the standard. What you do is change the behavior at that point. So
when you're talking about reckoning, I know this is an extreme example, but it's where we're at in our society. When you're talking about what Steve's saying of wrecking your life, is I had a gentleman come in who listened to the psychologists and listened to the professors and all the people in the college universities. Mm-hmm. And what they told him is that if you don't transition, you're going to kill yourself. Mm. And so he listened to him until he's sitting in front of me. And now he realizes that he's destroyed his life, and at his age, like getting married, like had a sex change, full on.
Yep.
And now you're dealing with physical issues, you're dealing with spiritual issues, you're dealing with what am I going to do because I want to be married? And they're sitting in front of me and they're looking at me going, I've wrecked my life, what do I do? And that's the carnage that can come out of that stuff until they realize. And then I gave them all the verses. God makes eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven, and God can change around and do anything. And there is hope in the Lord. And I've already seen it. I've already seen God take him through a fundamental change, and they're seeking after the Lord, and praise God for that. Mm-hmm. But there are things that he will deal with the rest of his life.
Yep. So. Because of lousy advice.
Yep.
Lousy, ungodly, unbiblical, tweaked worldview advice.
Yep. So don't do that.
Yeah.
All right. We are out of time for today. God bless you guys. If you have questions, send them to me, crosswalkradio@gmail.com. You can text 707-872-7677. Steve's Prophecy Update is coming up. It's on January 17th. Mm-hmm. And that's at 6:30 on a Wednesday night if you guys want to come out for that. If not, or also tonight, Wednesday night service, he's going to do an Israel wrap-up /Q&A where you guys can come and ask questions if you want to do that. If not, we're back to our normal service times, 7:30, 9:15, and 11:15. If you guys want to join us for church sometime, love to have you. If not, all our Bible studies are online. And so you have that. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you next Wednesday at 3:30 on True Set Free.